Hi everyone. Today I'm going to continue on with my videos on the films of 1972. I'm currently in the midst of science fiction genre from the year 1972. There wasn't very many science fiction movies in 72, surprisingly enough, given the influence of 2001, which was about 4 years earlier. I did talk about the Ground Star Conspiracy, which is Bill described as a science fiction movie, but it was really only tangentially science fiction. But the movie I want to talk about today is definitely science fiction, and this is Douglas Trumbull's Silent Running, starring Bruce Dern, an absolutely terrific performance by Bruce Dern, and terrific performances too by three robots, drones as they're called in the film. And the film opens, we're not really sure where we're at, but it opens with Bruce Dern in a kind of saintly robe, wandering through a idyllic kind of Garden of Eden with two drones following him. There's birds, there's rabbits, but then we realize we're in a dome in outer space, part of a spaceship. And we learned that Earth has suffered deforestation. They have created an artificial kind of environment. It's really a bit unclear as to what actually happened on Earth, but the spaceship is out there to preserve the beauties of nature, the wonders of nature, so that in some future time they might be able to use what they preserved to reforest the Earth. Dern is accompanied by 3 other astronauts along with 3 drones, but they look at their job. They look at what they're doing as a job, whereas Bruce Dern looks at it. His character, called Freeman Lowe, he looks at it as a holy mission. To preserve the wonders of nature. He is in tune with nature. There's sort of a hippie vibe. Hippies were still a thing in 1972, but and which is somewhat enhanced by this opening passage. And there's another song later, the 2 songs sung in very elegiac fashion by Joan Baez. In a kind of protest song, but beautifully subdued kind of protest in these 2 songs. But as Douglas Trumbull says in the supplements and interviews in the supplements filmed years later, he really wasn't out to make a protest against the environment. He wanted more of the focus on the relationships, especially the character psychology of the Bruce Dern character, Freeman Lowe. 1972, however, was a very significant era in environmental concerns, because this was the year, maybe a year or 2 before, when the Environmental Protection Agency was instituted, signed into law by Republican President Richard Nixon. Many of the rivers, streams, lakes were polluted. I lived a couple of years in Rochester, New York, and the beaches there that border Lake Ontario were closed for many years because of the severe pollution in Lake Ontario, and that was seen throughout the U.S. So there was consciousness of it. Of course, today with the battle over climate change, it's even more extreme weather that's occurring. We're seeing more or less some of the manifestations of what this kind of ecological concerns of 1972 play out 50 years later. So the other 3 astronauts are played by Jesse Vint and Ron Rifkin, Cliff Potts. Cliff Potts was also in the Ground Star Conspiracy, a really good actor who never really made it. Bruce Dern did at least make it. You know, he does have this film. He does have King of Marvin Gardens, which I did a video on. He was also in Smile a few years later. Excellent performance, and but he never really got that kind of lead career. More or less character actor, but always, always a very powerful presence on the screen, and including Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, even recently. They were all members of, the other three actors were members of Bruce Dern's acting class at the actor studio in LA. And one surmises that Dern was the sort of the director of the performances, and the interplay with the other actors, his own performance, his interplay with the drones, which can be that's the humorous part of the film. He teaches them to play cards. He sort of reprograms them, teaches them to play cards. And they learn, and he's just delighted when they learn. And it's probably the most memorable scene in the film. So we have the drama of the film comes from the moment, and it's early on in the movie, where they are informed that they're going back to Earth. The other three astronauts are, wow, we're going back. But Bruce Dern, of course, taking his custodial feelings for the forest, he's not so happy. And he's amazed that the other three astronauts don't have that same feeling for nature that he has. They've adopted on Earth. Earth has created some sort of artificial environment, perhaps. It's pretty vague. But everybody's happy. Cliff Potts says, why are you complaining about Earth? Everybody's happy. Everybody has a job. It's 75 degrees. But what about the beauty? And they look at him, the other three astronauts look at beauty. What's that? And the Dern character named Freeman Lowe, he is very much an outsider. And the screenplay was partially written by Mike Cimino. He's actually billed as Mike Cimino, along with Derek Washburn. And Freeman Lowe is a character very similar to the outsider going against the grain characters that populate Michael Cimino's films going forward. And both Washburn and Cimino wrote the screenplay to The Deer Hunter a few years later. They had a falling out because Cimino did not want Washburn to get credit in the screenwriting credit, but the Writers Guild insisted, and then they were nominated for Academy Award, and Deer Hunter won the Best Picture Oscar that year. Steve Bochco also worked on the screenplay, and before his found fame in Hill Street Blues, L.A. Law, many other television productions that he created or wrote episodes for. So Dern is this outsider, and he's a very complicated person because he doesn't really seem to know. You know, he seems to care more about the forest than he does about human beings, and there's a strange tension there where Dern is always likable, but he has that screen persona. There's always something off with him. And he doesn't play this part for our sympathy as if he is doing something grand and noble. It's a very interesting performance in a very interesting movie. And Douglas Trumbull, this is his debut film. And he had worked with Stanley Kubrick on the special effects on 2001 when he was very young. I think he's only like 29 here, but I actually came, I didn't know who he was, but he made a film for the 1964 New York World's Fair called, I think it was The Moon and Beyond, which was a sensation. And I was living outside New York at the time, and I went to the fair a couple times, and that was the that was one of the can't miss items in the fair, and Douglas Trumbull created that film. He only directed one other movie, and that was Brainstorm, 1983, which is Natalie Wood's last filming, and during the filming was when she tragically drowned. But he worked on so many other movies, special effects, and very famous movies like Close Encounters and Blade Runner and Star Trek, the movie, the first Star Trek movie, the theme park ride for Back to the Future in Disneyland, and has worked in all kinds of. He was very much attracted to the idea of making films bigger. So he had a process that was very similar to what would become IMAX, and I believe he's worked in IMAX several times. But there's also a commentary by Kim Newman and Barry Forshaw. Barry Forshaw also has an essay in the booklet. And Kim Newman, having written many science fiction movies, he knows every science fiction novels. He also knows everything there is to know about science fiction movies, and he has all this information at the tip of his hand. So it's a very lively discussion. I really enjoyed it. The film was produced by Universal, and this was a time like between, say, 2001 and Star Wars, although there were other films after Star Wars, but it was a film made at a time when the studios really didn't know what audiences wanted. Easy Rider had a deep impression on the studios. It was made for next to nothing, and it grossed, I don't know, $60–70 million. So they designed a program where they would give young, ambitious directors a $1 million budget. They could not go over $1 million. They had to shoot fast. This Silent Running was made in only 30 days. So when Trumbull worked on 2001, Kubrick had a big budget and, you know, a limitless schedule. He would just go on and on until he got it perfect, or in the way he thought it would be perfect. Trumbull had to really economize, and you know, his interest was really in designing the look of the film. They were able to get an aircraft carrier that was about to be scrapped, so they filmed the interiors of the film of Silent Running in the interiors of this aircraft carrier, and it was really, the sets were just perfect. They actually did as well some exterior work. The drones, which pretty much steal the show. Bruce Dern is pretty much the whole show, but the drones are there for the humor, and they were designed in a way that somebody could fit in them. But and Trumbull had the idea, having watched Freaks, a movie from the 1930s, of using double amputees, that they would be able to fit in there, and they would be able to use their hands to navigate the robots. So they're very realistic in their movements. But the film had a $1 million budget, and it had a good preview, big preview, significant reaction, positive reaction to the premiere in LA, but then they sort of just put it out there without any added publicity. Of course, publicity could have been costly, you know, more costly than the actual budget of the movie. So there were other films that depended on word of mouth to go forward. Five Easy Pieces, I think, was another film that didn't get any initial publicity of any significant kind. And I remember when Silent Running came out, there was just, you would find the ad for it. These were newspaper days and not the internet, so you would have to look at newspapers, see what's playing. Silent Running would always get this tiny little box down at the bottom. And I didn't really know anything about it, you know. I mean, this was, I knew Bruce Dern was in it, and I liked Bruce Dern. So I did seek it out. I liked it. I saw, if my recollection is correct, there was hardly anybody else in the theater at the time. But through the years, it's achieved cult status, and we get interviews from about maybe 2010 with Bruce Dern, and he said this is one of the films that he was in that he always gets comments on. Walking down the street, they talk about silent running. So it has pretty much stood the test of time, as so many of these other strange films from the early half of the 1970s have gotten. So thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen to me. I do appreciate it. Comments are always welcome. I'll see you next time.